think we were on SB 50, and I want to make sure, was there anything on that before we go ahead and clarify the amendment on 45?
We're ready to concur that we're pleased.
Okay, I think we have agreement on 50. Okay, during our first meeting, we did have discussion on Senate Bill 45 and calculation of graduation rate. We had some language that the revisers shared at that time. Since then, they have gone back and wordsmithed it, and I believe there are copies available. So you can see the actual language. Madam Chair, did you have any concerns over this precise language?
We'll visit, but I personally am happy with it. We appreciate the work of the revisor's office and accept the language.
We do as well, so that will be the language then that's reflected in the bill. So thank you for that. And so I think we now can move on from 45 and 50, which brings us to Senate Bill 114. If we can have the revisor give us a little overview and the changes that were made in the Senate and House committees.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senate Bill 114 would authorize non-public and virtual school students to participate in ancillary public school activities. In the Senate version, it had participation includes participation in ancillary activities and listed certain events, programs, and activities that included, including pep rallies, honor or award ceremonies, lettering events, yearbook, or other promotional functions. And the effective date of that was in the statute book. In the House version, instead of listing all of those that an ancillary activity might include, it says participation includes any district-sponsored events, ceremonies, programs, or other functions directly related to the primary activity. It also authorizes the Board of Education of these school districts to adopt policies regarding participation. And then it also includes provisions stating that students who withdraw from public school would not be eligible to participate in these types of activities for 9 weeks unless that student was eligible for participation prior to withdrawal, and the effective date from the House version is Kansas Register.
Just a quick question. I want to make sure on that last amendment that the House brought. It's if a student withdraws and then tries to participate in the school they withdrew from. Is that correct?
Correct. It says would not be eligible for full participation in any activities offered by such school district for the 9-week period immediately following their withdrawal.
The district or the school they were withdrawing from?
It says activities offered by such school district.
So then a student, I'm from Wichita. We have 9 comprehensive high schools. So a student withdraws from North and then they wouldn't be eligible even if they had a legitimate transfer to East? I thought it was the same school.
This would only be if they subsequently enrolled in an accredited private school, non-public elementary or secondary school, or a virtual school.
Okay, Representative Estes.
Wouldn't they be required to go to the school in their attendance center under the current statute? So I think that might be why we phrased it that way.
Correct. I believe they would have to be a resident of the school district in order to participate in the activities of that school district.
In that school building, correct?
The current statute simply says is a resident of the school district. May I? But just... This bill only applies to students who are no longer or have never been a public school student. So this is only for those homeschool, non-accredited private schools or virtual school students to participate in school district activities.
Representative Estes.
Our intention was to close a loophole where some students withdraw from their current attendance center, declare themselves homeschooling, an affidavit is filled out, but they were failing before they pulled themselves out. So I think our intention was about the same attendance center. So that's just kind of where we were coming from, and the language may not read the way that we had intended it to, but could we confirm, Madam Chair?
Yes, and that's the intent that I understood. I want to make sure the language is reflective of that, because I don't want to have one standard for students who withdraw to go to a private or non-accredited school, and one for brick and mortar who are allowed then to go from one school to another without sitting out 9 weeks. I want it to be consistent. So if you can, do you have an answer for that, Tamara?
The language currently speaks to school districts, so if the committee would like more clarity on that, I would recommend thinking about changing that a little bit.
Okay, thank you. And I know that Senator Sykes has a question.
My question would be, where did the 9 weeks come from? And if a student was currently participating in a sports in a public school and then they switched, is there something with Acacia or something that they have to sit out? I'm trying to make things consistent.
Representative Estes, the question was, where did the 9 weeks come from? Is that from Acacia rule? Can you respond to that?
That we had taken from what we believe to have been an accurate Acacia rule, and I believe now that the number is 18 weeks.
I don't know about that, but to me, I think the intent all along with allowing students to participate was that they would be subject to the same Acacia rules as anybody else. I almost think rather than putting a certain time frame, since Acacia rules do fluctuate, maybe making it per Acacia rule. Representative McNorton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Maybe one of the revisers can confirm this, but after our discussion, we did have a pretty good discussion afterwards. The Acacia rule is a semester or 18 weeks, the way I read it. So I'm not a lawyer, but that's the way I read the Acacia rules. Thank you, Madam Chair.
But if I heard you right, Tamara, you said this bill only applies to students who are no longer or have ever been in a public school. Is that, did I understand that correctly?
Correct. The statute that is being amended in this bill is specific to students who are non-public, non-accredited, non-public school students or virtual school students, and allowing them to participate in the activities of the school district where they reside.
Well, if that's the case, then I'm thinking that this isn't necessary because it doesn't pertain, because this, if I understand correctly, is if a school were to transfer from a brick and mortar or a public school, and that's not the case here because this does not apply to students who are enrolled in a brick and mortar public school. Is that correct?
While they are enrolled in the brick and mortar school, if they transferred to a non-accredited, non-public school or a virtual school, then they could be eligible to participate in these activities under this statute.
If I may, Madam Chair.
Yes, Representative Estes.
That requirement, it points backwards in time. While that student was in the brick and mortar building, you use that date into their last day in school. If they leave and become homeschool, if we do not make this change, they could turn around even though they were failing and come back in. So this does apply to the student who is left. We just look backwards in time to were they passing and were they in good behavior standing on the date that they withdrew.
And if they were, then would the 9 weeks not apply?
That's the point. If you were academically eligible and you were not a behavior problem, you can continue forward. But what it does is it closes the loophole, because I'm aware of at least one instance, and have been told of others, where a parent has withdrawn, said, I'm homeschooling, filled out the affidavit, and the day before, that child was not academically eligible, and they continued to play. So this is to make sure that that is not abused.
Okay. Give us a few moments to discuss. But did you have a question? Representative Stockstill, or, I'm sorry, I saw Representative Stockstill.
I had a question and then maybe a quick comment. Is there any scenario under this where a student comes in and would be actually allowed to participate in a graduation ceremony?
Tamara?
So the way the language in the bill currently reads is if they were participating in an activity pursuant to Section 1, which would be the CASA-regulated activities, then they would be allowed to participate in district-sponsored events, ceremonies, programs, or other functions directly related to that activity.
Yeah, I just had one quick comment. To me, this is absolutely a classic example of legislative overreach. This is the incident that was the genesis for this legislation. I checked with the representative from that area, and he told me that was addressed by the local school board. And again, I think that we should allow local school boards and the State Board of Education to handle issues like this, and not impose law where decisions by local school boards and the State Board of Education could easily have handled this. So, thank you.
Representative McNorton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So as we discuss this, remember, it's really two parts of the bill. One part to let the kids participate, and then the second part about how they can participate if they're not eligible at the brick and mortar school. Thank you.
And if I recall, then there's also, you amended the bill also to permit each local board to adopt policies if they chose to let those students participate in non-related activities as well. Is that correct?
That is correct. We heard testimony that one school believed they couldn't allow, and that kind of generated the situation there. And I believe there's other situations in another school district as well. So we became aware that there were some school districts that allow the same students to go to homecoming and prom and whatever. So we wanted to just make it clear that if a district chose to do that, a district could, and all that decision making is with the district and their board.
Any other questions before we discuss amongst our bodies? I do want to take a moment, if I can, of personal privilege. I see we have a former school board member that I served with in Newton here today. I'm assuming with maybe some grandchildren, I don't know, but Barbara Bunting from Newton. Welcome. Okay, give us a minute to discuss, please. Before we make our proposal to the House, we do have a question on what it means by limited participation on page 3, line 28. If someone could clarify that. Jason?
Yes, Madam Chair, members of the committee, my understanding is the limited participation allows the student to continue attending practices, but denies them full participation in competitive games.
And do you know, is that consistent with CASA policy?
That is my understanding, but I would have to confirm with Keisha.
Okay, Representative Estes?
My understanding that CASA has that policy, and sometimes they want to maintain the relationship with the student and keep them encouraged, and they allow them to work out or practice, and but they don't get to play until they've met eligibility.
Senator Thomas?
Do we have that phrase limited participation defined somewhere? Because that kind of leaves it open to interpretation. And so we could be back here next year having to work on something because a district says limited participation. So we feel like you can attend practice once a week, but then really is there a clear definition so the districts can't interpret it in their own way and then sort of make rules about participation on their own?
Jason?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, my understanding is that the districts would be subject to CASA's rules and policies on that issue as member school districts.
Senator Sykes?
Thank you. That would be my question. Should we tie that to permitted participation according to CASA's guidelines? Or you feel like this is allowing that participation?
Jason?
I believe as the language is written without any further clarification in the statute, it would defer to CASA's policies and rules regarding participation.
Okay, thank you. We do have a proposal that instead of specifying 9 weeks, that we make that per CASA rules, consistent with CASA rules.
Jason, would that be a concern with, at all, with delegating authority?
I believe as the bill is written right now, I think it's in line with the other policies in this bill that defer, as I just said, to what are CASA standing rules and policies.
Okay, we'll discuss. Thank you. And thank you, Jason.
Representative Estes?
Just for clarity, the CASA rule that we would be referring to is how long any student who is academically ineligible would sit out.
To me, it was clarifying the situation where if a student transfers and it's specified that there's that 9-week period for that student who's not in good standing, who drops out and then tries to come back in, that they would have to sit out per CASA rules instead of the 9 weeks specified in the bill. Jason, do you know the current Acacia rule for transfers? Is it 18 weeks? Is it, or Matthew, if you know?
That would be
What is the current
acad-
Acacia rule? That's what we
for
want to know.
academically ineligible transfers.
Transfers.
Madam Chair, so for students, for a transfer, if they change schools without an accompanying move on the part of their parent, then for grades 9 through 12, it is 1 calendar year, and for grades 7 through 8, it is 18 weeks. I'm still looking, but don't necessarily see time-wise if you're academically ineligible. But I'll keep looking in case there is something else.
Matthew, did you have some additional information?
Yes, Madam Chair. So under the scholarship requirements, it does state that a student who must attend a semester to regain scholastic eligibility may not participate in inter-school activities until after they've attended classes in a new semester. And it does state that a semester, each half year must consist of at least 18 weeks. So again, I would defer to Keisha on certainty, but for scholarship, it does look like they're kind of calling a semester is the way I would read that.
So we have two different, we have one for when a student transfers and one for a student who's academically ineligible. So we're looking at two different rules here, so, correct? And yours was the one that was academically, which would apply to the amendment we're speaking to. A student who withdraws, who's not in good standing and then wants to go to another school would be the latter one that you just described, correct?
I would presume, but again, Keisha would definitely be able to weigh in more, certainly.
Representative, the Senate is good with the Acacia rules.
We are good with the Acacia rule as long as we are saying it's the academic semester. And just want that to be very clear.
I believe that's our understanding, and as long as it's consistent with the Acacia rule, the Senate agrees with that.
Okay? We concur.
Okay, very good. Is there anything else on Senate Bill 114? Representative Estes?
We are very content with Senate Bill 114.
I believe we are as well. That's always nice. So we have agreement on Senate Bill 114. So I believe we do have Senate Bill 281 that was passed in the Senate. I see that Tamara is not here to give us a little overview on that. I could try to explain it if that's agreeable to the House. While Jason is catching his breath, this was a bill brought to us by the Treasurer's Office, and it relates to the Kids Matching Grant Program and sunsetting that program in 3 years due to the labor intensiveness and that the federal government does not require 529s to be audited in the same way that this is. So there was agreement amongst all of the parties that were involved in this program that sunsetting it in 3 years, some provisions related to how they audit in the meantime, and then having a 529 take the place of the Kids Matching Grant Program would be an acceptable way to move forward to continue these benefits going forward. So that's my simple explanation. It passed the Senate 40-0, and I will let Jason take it from here.
Yes, Madam Chair, members of the committee, that actually was a very good explanation of what the bill does substantively. There are provisions in there for audits of withdrawals of matching funds during the phase out of the program until it sunsets, and also provisions for the secretary in determining non-qualified withdrawals and other findings under those audits with respect to those programs as it is phased out. It would go into effect on publication in the Kansas Register as the bill is currently written.
So are there any questions from the House? Okay. Okay.
We have no questions. We're ready to discuss.
Okay. Representative Estes.
Representative Estes is very familiar with the state treasurer who felt that, yes, this was a very labor-intensive bill or program, and the House makes an offer that we accept 281 as it is and add it to Senate Bill 50, which is the uniform interest rate bill.
Okay, give us a moment. Yes, the question is, what are the points of connection between Senate Bill 281 and Senate Bill 50? Jason.
My understanding is the programs under Senate Bill 281 could be used for post-secondary educational expenses, and so therefore we would title it regarding post-secondary education financing.
The Senate agrees. Representative Estes.
I think we're done with that one then.
Okay, well, I would propose moving the contents of 114 into Senate Bill 45.
We'll discuss. The House accepts the Senate's position. The House accepts this.
So we're putting a student activities acacia bill into a graduation rate. Again, I would ask the revisor, what are our points of connection? Because I'm not sure that we're under the single subject.
Revisor Long.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, the nexus would be K-12 education. Both bills deal with provisions dealing with K-12 education.
Senator Sykes.
I think that is very broad, and I don't think this would fit germaneness on the Senate floor.
Representative Estes.
It occurred to us that there is another nexus point, I believe, and if the advisor can let us know, I believe both bills deal with transferring students, and that adds a second nexus. Is that correct, Jason?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, with respect to Senate Bill 114 and Senate Bill 45, they do both involve language with students moving between schools and school districts. And so to that point, there is another arguable point of a nexus between the two bills.
The Senate has an alternative proposition that we would like the House to consider. So we would like to remove the contents of Senate Bill 44, insert 114, leaving 114 available. All right, that's true. We just want to remove the contents of 44.
We'd like to discuss. Jason, would you join us, please?
Representative Estes.
So we, or I was originally holding out hope that since that met the rule that it passed both chambers and made it conferenceable without a pay-go. But I think at this point, we're far enough into the budgeting process. I don't think the extra money will get there. So we will agree to the Senate's position, but come back at it next year.
We all agree, I believe, with that as well, so. Okay. Representative Estes.
So our last bill is a House bill, which is the anti-Semitism bill. And we would, if you would like to have a update from the reviser, we can do that, and then the House has an offer.
Jason.
Yes, Madam Chair, members of the committee, substitute for House Bill 2299 simply declares anti-Semitism and anti-Semitic acts to be against the public policy of the state, including but not limited to the purposes of public educational institutions and law enforcement agencies in the state. And the bill then provides a non-legally binding definition of anti-Semitism and anti-Semitic acts, which is the working definition from the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, including the contemporary examples as in effect on May 26th of 2016. The bill also provides that nothing in the act is to be construed to diminish or infringe upon any right protected under the First Amendment of the United States Constitution or the Bill of Rights of the state of Kansas.
Representative Estes.
We would offer to move 2299 into the Promise Scholarship number 44.
Give us just a moment. The Senate agrees. We didn't even have to leave the room. We agree.
Okay, I believe we've addressed all of our bills. Is there anything that you show that I am missing?
I believe we have come to agreement on all bills in conference. I want to thank the House for their good work and the staff and my colleagues in the Senate. Is there anything else that you need from us, Mr. Advisor? Okay, thank you so much. Representative Estes.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
We're adjourned.